The High Museum of Art in Atlanta, Georgia maintains a splendid European art gallery, which was recently enhanced by the addition of a large collection of French Impressionist artwork. So let's take a tour through these displays in the South's largest art museum. First off, here's a masterpiece of 19th century Italian naturalistic carving, with that veil on Rebecca from the Old Testament. This is a late 12th century altarpiece from a Franciscan chapel featuring Saint Louis of Toulouse, who became a Franciscan monk after renouncing his right to the French throne. There's a 13th century terracotta sculpture of Saint Sebastian as he's being shot by arrows. This is a work by Lucas Cranach the Elder, one of the most important German Renaissance artists. It's a portrait of Duke Henry the Devout of Saxony from 1528. Another strong German piece is this late Gothic wood carving of St. Andrew from the famous workshop of Tilman Riemenschneider in Würzburg. This is a Madonna and Child by the great Giovanni Bellini, one of the most influential early Renaissance painters. He was a real innovator of oil paint and color. This is a great example of both, alongside the inclusion of a natural landscape in the background. This 17th century scene by Nicolas Tournier depicts Paul's spiritual crisis after he denied being a follower of Christ. Here is the Adoration of the Magi by Benvenuto Tisi from 1534. These scenes showcase the Thanksgiving of Noah after the flood ended. Christ and the Samaritan Woman by Il Guernico was created as part of the Counter-Reformation. This 18th century painting depicts the battle between the Lapiths and Centaurs by Sebastiano Ricci, who contributed to a revitalization of Venetian art at that time. Another one of the great Venetian Rococo painters from that era was Giovanni Battista Tiepolo, who made this scene of Roman matrons making offerings to Juno to hang above a door in Venice's Palazzo Barbero. Another highlight is this piece by Jan Bruegel the Elder and Peter Paul Rubens. It is titled The Holy Family with a Garland of Flowers, made in Rubens' workshop around 1620. Bruegel did the floral wreath, which he was so well known to do, while Rubens and one of his assistants composed the Holy Family scene inside the wreath. This scene is set in the Dutch town of Kampen and shows winter games on the ice, which were popular in the 1600s. And these are delicate 17th century scientific illustrations by Jan van Kessel. This gallery houses the Shaheen Collection, a significant grouping of Impressionist and early modern French art that was gifted to the museum fairly recently in 2019. There is nothing necessarily iconic here, but there are still plenty of good examples by many of the major players in the emerging avant-garde scene. First off, this is a Seated Woman with a Mandolin by Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot from around 1868. Below there is a Claude Monet piece, titled The Cliffs of Pourville, Rough Sea. That's a work by Bertha Morisot titled The Water Jug from 1893. Next there is a Renoir, Calvary and Church at Nizam from the same year. There's a classic Camille Pissarro portrait of a peasant woman. That's a great 1880s impressionistic landscape by Alfred Sisley of the barges at Saint-Mamet. That's a portrait by the influential Edouard Manet, next to a Sisley impression, a street in Marly from 1876. There's much more where that came from, like this quintessential Renoir pastel piece. Here's a work by the American Impressionist Mary Cassatt. It's a pastel on paper work of a girl holding her little chien. That's adorable. On the left there's a 1916 scene by Edouard Villard, juxtaposed by the outskirts of Paris done by the Fauvist Maurice de Vlaminck in 1922. Here is the Windmill at Senois by the famed Montmartre-based artist Maurice Utrillo from 1911. Here are some works by the Nabi artists Edouard Villard and Pierre Bonnard. I also like the little dog in Bonnard's cup of coffee. It is joined by a rather unusual work by Amedeo Modigliani from 1914. His brushstrokes were much more short and choppy than usual in this portrait of his one-time partner, the English writer and poet Beatrice Hastings. This somewhat new collection at the High features several delightful seaside scenes by the Normandy-based marine impressionist Eugène Boudon. There's a work by Claude Monet from 1885 titled The House Along the Road. Here is a respectful 1874 portrait of a peasant woman, La Mère Jolie Recommandant or Mother Jolly Mending, by Camille Pissarro. And that's a classic flower still life by Henri Fontaine-Latour. This is the Champmeslé hamlet at the foot of the cliffs, painted in 1880 by Claude Monet. Here's another Pissarro, The Peasant in the Underbrush at Muret from 1901, which incorporates broad brushwork showing his attention to the physicality of form and setting. Pissarro moved to London to escape the Franco-Prussian War back in 1870, and he returned to London several more times in the ensuing decades. This is from an 1892 trip when he went to paint the Black Swans at Kew Gardens. This is a farm scene done by Alfred Sisley in 1874, and he painted this thatched cottage in Normandy 20 years later. That's a small 1916 portrait of a little girl by Henri Matisse. And this was a preparatory sketch made by Matisse in 1924 of a woman seated at her piano. Given the wallpaper in the background, it is believed that this was set in his Nice home. This is one of Félix Bracquemont's most famous prints of a hyper-realistic barn door with birds nailed to it. He made this when he was 19 years old. This is an etching of Pierre Bonnard's cat and dog. He frequently included his pets in his prints and paintings. These are two studies of horses from 1760 made by the famed English mapmaker turned realist landscape painter Paul Sandby. Here is a Francisco de Goya bullfighting etching, which was part of a 33-plate series about the history of bullfighting. This is a lithograph by Eugène Delacroix of a wild horse. In the Romanticist tradition, the horse would be seen as a metaphor for the will of political and artistic freedom. These are examples of French colonialism in art, highlighting the mid-19th century fascination with the Orient, particularly North Africa and the Middle East. Here are some fine French and American furnishings which showcase the late 19th century fascination with Japanese and East Asian styles. Here's a Boudon piece that's been at the museum for a while, an 1871 view of boats on the Scheldt in Antwerp. Those sculptures are by the Salon artist Jacques-Louis Gaultier. They are based on Faust and Macbeth, and that's a Boudon still life of a lobster. This Frederic Bazille scene of the beach at Saint-Adresse manifests a windy, overcast day on the northeast coast of France. Here are two works by the realist Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot. He really paved the way for the Impressionists. Another important French realist was Charles-François d'Aubigny. This is the banks of the Oise River from 1875. During his latter years, he traversed the rivers of France in his boat, painting scenes like this one all along the way. There is a lot of Boudon at the High. In this Normandy scene, he included impressions of cows. This is a memorial bust of the great novelist Honoré de Balzac by the popular sculptor Pierre-Eugène Émile Hébert. Here is a phenomenal 1874 winter scene by Camille Pissarro, a snowscape with cows at Montfoucault, which is quite different from his usual lush green pictures. This is a bouquet of flowers painted by Pissarro in 1873. It is believed that he would only paint flowers and still lifes when it was raining too much to go outside, otherwise he was out on plein air. And there is yet another Pissarro, The Road to Marly from 1870. This is a romantic-style tiger bronze by Antoine Louis Barye. There's a rare combo, a bust and painting by the more so famous sculptor Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux. His expressive sculptural style was highly influential on Auguste Rodin. Speaking of Rodin, here's a 1960s cast of his Eternal Spring. This 1890s portrait by Henri Martin has hints of pointillism. This is a woman of Bologna nursing her child, a small plaster cast by Aimé Jules Deleuze, who often created dignified sculptures of peasants, and this is Deleuze's seated bather. This is a brilliant 1873 painting by Claude Monet, an autumn view of the Seine at Argenteuil, a town where he lived and painted northwest of Paris. Pierre-Auguste Renoir painted this work, The Woman Arranging Her Hat, in 1890 at a time when he started using much brighter colors and broader brushstrokes. This is a young woman of Trastevere from 1860 by Charles Cordier, who is known in Paris as the chief sculptor of works for the new natural history museums. He made this after he was sent on a trip to find marble for export and to study subjects in Italy and Greece. Here's the classic Toulouse-Latrec Ambassadeur lithograph. This is a crayon, brush, and splatter lithograph of the Clowness at the Moulin Rouge from 1897. Here is one of Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec's lithographs of the dancer Jane Avril. Here's another one of C.C. Loftus, a Scottish vaudevillian nicknamed the Sarah Bernhardt of the Halls. And this is the Sick Carnot, another Toulouse-Lautrec print. This is a little laughing woman by the Italian sculptor Medardo Rosso. The placard says that he was part of a small group attempting to create the sculptural equivalent of Impressionism by capturing in 3 dimensions the fleeting qualities of light and movement. That is the Sleeping Diana from 1924. Here is a beautiful, shimmering pointillistic scene of the Port of London at night from 1894, done by Maximilien Luce, who had a strong interest in London's industrial locations. Here is a post-Nabi work of Pierre Bonnard's called The Breakfast, though it is still reminiscent of the Nabi style with a flat perspective and rich color. And here is Edouard Villard's Woman before a plaster relief, a scene believed to be set in Villard's studio. That's a tiny bronze by Carpeaux of Cupid being disarmed. Here is a small seated nude by Henri Matisse. He made seemingly countless versions of this subject. This is a phenomenal and rare work of the Expressionist Haïm Soutine. He painted this in 1922 on a trip to the town of Céret in the French Pyrenees along with about 200 other works. However, after that long sojourn, he destroyed most of the paintings after developing a distaste for his own work. And here's a plaster Bacchus with grapes by the influential modern French sculptor Antoine Bourdelle. That's a portrait from the studio of Sir Joshua Reynolds, one of the most important 18th century British artists. Here's a work by the American-born artist Benjamin West, who was perhaps the first American artist to achieve international acclaim. This is Arethusa from 1802, a scene of an attendant to Artemis out of Ovid's Metamorphoses. Here is the funeral of Atala, an 1811 scene based on the popular novel The Last of the Abencerrages, a French version of Romeo and Juliet set in the New World. And here's a little King Louis XIV on a horse. Also, here is a 17th century Dutch painting by Pieter Lasman, which was scratched with a pen by accident in 2021 while hanging in the galleries. However, they were able to treat and fix the historic painting. So the European art collection at the High is great. Definitely grounded in 19th century French art, but no complaints there. There is a special exhibition untitled In the City of Lights, which features Parisian art and history from the mid-19th century and into the early 20th century. So if you did not see enough French art here, all that is featured in a separate video which is linked in the description. While you're at it, check out the other exhibits of this museum by continuing your tour with the other videos linked in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the like button, sharing it, subscribing, and checking out my plethora of videos on art museums and much more across Europe and America. Thank you for watching.